This is my room, and this is how it looks in my videos. Most people assume you need a big space to shoot cinematic videos. I thought the same thing. But then I started noticing creators making beautiful shots in rooms even smaller than mine. So maybe the problem isn't the room, but how we are using the space.
And today I want to find out.
We'll film some close-ups.
Whoa, that's too close.
We'll clean and rearrange our stuff and try some weird angles. But first, I had to get rid of this. It was way too much. When I first tried to fix my space, I thought the answer was more gear. Honestly, I'm guilty of buying way too many lamps. I thought because I don't have a sunlight all year, often it's hard to record anything inside without a good light. Unless I wanted to look a bit dark. The shopping spree continued, but then one tripod after another I realized I'm not making better things. I'm just constantly tripping over new gear lying on the floor. Ironic, huh? So I decided to minimize what I'm using. One camera, one light, except for the practicals, obviously, and two tripods. That's all I need to create. I think it's safe to assume that we're all gonna start filming at our own place. It's the cheapest way. You don't have to go anywhere. No friction, no excuses about bad weather. Just grab a camera and start filming. But with all living spaces, there's a tiny problem. We actually live there. It's not a studio, it's not a set, so we need to find a way to keep it both livable and ready to film. Whenever I try to live normally at my home and I didn't think about making my videos, I would immediately face an obstacle, or actually a huge pile of obstacles. So before every shoot, I'd spend hours preparing, organizing my space, and suddenly my energy was gone. I was drained. The setup was too much. I didn't have any capacity left for the actual filming. So I thought, okay, maybe the opposite would work. I kept my gear always ready. Softbox on a first tripod, camera on a second one, negative fill hanging next to the window like a curtain, exact positions every time. As some YouTubers say, you need to have a dedicated spot or two to film your videos. Don't touch them. The fewer things between you and recording your videos, the better. But it made my room not inviting anymore. It was starting to look like the film set. It became more clinical, not comfy. Even my dog was complaining, like, what the bark? Is that how I'm supposed to lie on my Togo chair? So it didn't work. And I tried the last approach. Maybe every piece of my gear could be ready to go, but just in the corner or in the closet. A quick move and shoot. Perfect. A compromise. So now that I had some foundations, there was a problem. At best, I had three angles. The Togo heaven, the techie desk, and the food corner. But in the cinematic videos I watched, there are hundreds of angles. So how did I make the space bigger? Or maybe it's not about how big it is. I had an idea. What if things didn't have to stay in the same place? A list of things that can be moved. The whole kitchen, doors, walls, and my dog if the sun is shining, and things that could be easily moved. Well, turns out almost everything was on the second list. But honestly, this made sense. I started seeing that in many videos. Mirrors in different spots, paintings that moved, plants suddenly appearing in different corners. I started noticing creators constantly rearranging their spaces. 3 spots could become 100. Suddenly, my small room felt enormous. But once the room started changing, something interesting happened. Each new angle unlocked a different kind of shot. I know that most of my scenes fell in 3 types of shots. Some shots show the whole room, others bring you closer to the action, and the closest ones reveal the details and emotions. Which means every new angle multiplies the possibilities. Which is great. This makes our space even more flexible. But there's one thing I've seen that makes the whole thing next level. You should bend those rules. When filming in small spaces, I noticed I kept defaulting to medium shots. It's safe, it's easy, it's the classic talking head setup. But the real magic happens at the extremes. Wide angles can be harder because of the space size, and close-ups make you much more vulnerable. But both of these things can be a huge advantage if you bend the rules. With wide angles, it's not entirely true that your space is too small. It's often when you put your camera that's wrong. See, the most obvious place to put your camera is on your tripod. But what if it hangs from the ceiling or sits on the floor, tilted up by a book you've been reading? There's also one special trick that I love, but we'll get to it in a moment. With close-ups, it's a bit different, because you need to open up. When I shoot some objects, it's easy, they don't have feelings. You can put your camera on a table and tilt it slightly up. 2 coasters are perfect. Do a POV shot, no coasters needed. Maybe put a camera on a tripod and do a slow zoom with a tilt down. But with your own face, it's tricky. Each close-up reveals what you truly think. You can't fake easily emotions in a close-up, but you can use it to make it more tense, less comfortable for you and the viewer, almost touching your viewer's screen. This is where emotions are intense, and it's a good way to emphasize a point. And you know what? All of these things can be done on your desk, within an arm's reach. You don't need to go anywhere. It might be a small space technically, but here it becomes 100 times bigger emotionally. Now, earlier I mentioned there's one trick I love, and the first time I saw it, it genuinely surprised me. You see, normally before you hit record, you immediately notice 2 things. Your face is in focus and your background is a bit blurry. We often create only these 2 layers. But what if the whole room is made of multiple layers? We just need to position our camera the right way. I usually start to look for obstacles. Plants are great, books are nice, even a coffee table can do the job. I hide the camera slightly behind one of them. I keep myself in focus, but I make sure the leaves remain blurry. This creates more depth. Now the frame has 3 layers. A blurry foreground, yourself in focus, and the background behind you. If someone sat behind this plant, they'd assume the room is quite big, which is exactly what we want. But sometimes placing camera behind something isn't enough. A little movement changes everything. I'm a big fan of static shots. My tripod is almost glued to my camera. I think you can use your space in so many ways just by mounting your camera on a tripod and not moving it. But occasionally, this gentle push-in gives the frame this nice ooh feeling, and suddenly the room doesn't feel so tight anymore. Sometimes I push my tripod just a few inches forward, and honestly, if your tripod has wheels, this becomes ridiculously easy. If it doesn't, you can actually get detachable wheels for almost every tripod. It's gonna change your life, really. Sometimes I spread the tripod legs unevenly and hold one of them. I gently move the camera to create a revealing shot. I'm not gonna lie, this takes at least a few attempts to make it smooth. And if I can't move the camera at all, I cheat a little and add a slow zoom in editing. It's not the same thing, but sometimes this subtle zoom, that tiny movement, helps the scene breathe. Suddenly it's not that crammed. So after all of that, I finally sit down and I realize it's almost evening. Yeah, the room won. So, do we see each other tomorrow? No. That actually reminded me of something. I usually prefer filming during the day. Sunlight gives me energy and I can use less gear. But there's a problem. Daylight usually looks a bit flat. I need shadows. I need darkness. In the evenings though, I have the opposite problem. I need to use lamps extensively just to expose everything correctly. But this gives me an interesting edge. Darkness hides the size of the room. When everything is evenly lit, like during the day, the room reveals its true size. And you can feel it too. But when you have strong shadows, spots where you can barely see anything. You can no longer easily tell where the edge is. Your space becomes more mysterious. Warm practical lamps make the room feel cozy, and you realize maybe the room is not that small after all. And while turning on those practical lamps, you can also start to mix color temperatures. A warmer light on the subject and a slightly cooler background. Suddenly you stand out in the frame. Or you can go even further and create a cool light casting from the window side. Then you can use warm practical lights, and then you can balance everything out with a key light. When I look at the footage later, I can feel like I could almost step into the frame. A perfect light can do magic, sure. But what also gave me some interesting shots was texture. Especially when I'm doing top-down shots, I look for texture. Surfaces that aren't perfectly even. Something that doesn't feel like a flat studio background. My desk has an imperfect wooden structure, for example. I love how bright objects pop up when placed on it, but at the same time they blend a bit. Same with the coffee table, that's made from a bit of a funky wood. Even a carpet can do the job because you're adding a pretty good pattern. When combined with sunlight, you're suddenly getting a pretty decent angle. I try to use as many natural things for the background as I can. This makes me feel like I'm filming something that's actually not staged. It belongs to the room, to my living space. And subconsciously, it feels like the possibilities are expanding, which is good, because this can create this creative spark or something. A nice texture is another way to create some pretty interesting angles. But sometimes, even if you do all of these things, you're gonna face situations where you can't easily put everything in one place. Like for example, this angle. There's not enough space to put a lamp in front of my face, so I constantly fight with shadows. To solve this, I put a practical lamp on my left so that I sometimes can use a pocket light, because I believe that every artificial source of light should be motivated by something that's already there, already in our space, or like a window or something. But honestly, I use my pocket lamps very sparingly, because sometimes it's easier to just crank up the ISO if you're just a bit underexposed. I know it's gonna create some noise, but I would add some grain in post anyway. And in fact, a little bit of noise makes the whole image less fake, I guess. I've struggled with this idea for years. I denoised everything. But at some point I realized that my eyes don't see the world without noise. When you go outside and it's dark, you don't see everything clearly. You see the lights fall off and noise in the deep shadows. Try it next time when you go out at night. You'll see a subtle noise everywhere. When I first realized it, I thought to myself, maybe it's perfectly fine to embrace some noise. And now I'm not afraid of it. If I have an angle when I can't put my light easily, I just increase my ISO. Otherwise I would probably never use that angle, and I'd be bummed about it. All of these things I've said so far can make you see your space as not so small anymore. It's a matter of how you look at it. People tend to see the room and tell themselves they'll start making videos once this space is more suitable, or when they go outside or shoot at a studio. But honestly, you're perfectly fine with a small space. I blamed my space for years. I rented a few apartments the last couple of years, and every single one had its flaws. I could only see them as a limitation. I didn't want to create in them. I was always like, it doesn't work here. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to think that maybe I'm not that creative. Maybe something's wrong with me. But the thing is, that was just me overthinking my constraints. My creativity was fine. My space was fine. It just wasn't a mansion or a film set. But with a few simple tweaks that I shared with you, it started to look actually quite big. It started to feel like I could do 90% of stuff I want without going out. And some creators use their tiny rooms in so many crazy ways. In fact, now I'm eager to find even more things I could do with my place. Before I thought that I'd make 3 or 4 videos and I would run out of angles. Now I realize I've barely started exploring this room, so let's not blame the space anymore, shall we?